You know what's worse than finding lipstick on your husband's collar? Finding it on his credit card statement. That's what I told my therapist the day after I discovered everything. Her face remained professionally blank, but I caught that micro expression of shock. Even professionals aren't prepared for the calculated calm of a woman who's been betrayed but refuses to burn her own life down in response. I'm Rachel, and I'm still not entirely comfortable sharing this story. 3 months ago, I was just another successful business owner with what I thought was a happy marriage. 15 years with the same man, building our lives together. While I simultaneously built my interior design firm from nothing into something that now employs 27 people, my husband Mark supposedly supported my ambition, cheered my success, and seemed genuinely proud of what I'd accomplished. I should have known better. Success makes certain types of men feel diminished. It started with the notification from our shared American Express account, a charge for $412 at Le Mistral, an intimate French restaurant across town that Mark and I had visited exactly once for our anniversary 3 years ago. The date was significant. It was a Tuesday when he was supposedly at a regional architecture conference in Seattle. Something cold and sharp settled in my stomach. I've always had excellent instincts in business, the same instinct that told me when a client was lying or when a competitor was vulnerable, now screamed that something was very wrong in my marriage. I didn't confront him immediately. That's what he would have expected. Tears, accusations, the standard betrayed wife routine. That gives a cheating husband the upper hand, the script that lets him manage your reaction rather than face his actions. Instead, I did what I do best: research. I hired a private investigator, not the sleazy kind from noir films, but a digital forensic specialist who charged an obscene hourly rate and was worth every penny. Within a week I had everything: her name, Jessica Monroe; her age, 28 to my 42; her occupation, marketing coordinator at a downtown startup; and dozens of text messages between them that made me physically ill to read, not just because of the intimacy, but because of how he described me to her. My wife is completely absorbed in her business. We barely connect anymore. Rachel's idea of romance is reviewing quarterly projections together. I stay because leaving would be financially complicated. But you're who I really want. Each message was a knife precisely aimed and expertly twisted. The PI had even documented 7 business trips in the past year that were actually rendezvous with Jessica. Dinner receipts, hotel charges, even a weekend getaway to Carmel that he told me was a sales retreat. The night I reviewed all the evidence, Mark came home late as usual. He kissed my cheek, asked about my day with practiced disinterest, and mentioned that he might need to travel again next month for client meetings. I smiled and told him I'd made his favorite dinner. We ate while he scrolled through his phone beneath the table, thinking I didn't notice. "You seem quiet tonight," he said. Finally, when the silence had stretched too long, I looked up from my plate and studied his face. The face I'd woken up to for 15 years. The face that now belonged partly to someone else. "Just thinking about a potential new hire," I replied. "Someone who could really shake things up at the company?" "That's my girl," he said with that patronizing smile I suddenly realized I'd grown to hate. "Always thinking about the business." I nodded and took a sip of wine, letting the plan form in my mind. Because Mark wasn't entirely wrong. I was always thinking about business. And in business, you don't just react emotionally when something threatens you. You strategize. You identify leverage. You turn vulnerability into opportunity. "Actually," I said, setting down my glass with deliberate care, "I think this might be my most brilliant staffing decision yet." He wasn't really listening anymore, already back to his phone, probably texting her. Right there at our dinner table. That night, as he slept beside me, I opened my laptop and pulled up Jessica Monroe's resume and social media profiles. Young, ambitious, with just enough experience to be useful but not enough to demand top salary. Currently employed, but according to her LinkedIn activity, quietly looking for new opportunities. Perfect. By morning, I had created a job posting that practically had her name written all over it. Senior marketing strategist at my design firm. A significant step up from her current role with salary and benefits that would be impossible to refuse. The beauty of it? She had no idea who I was. Mark had always kept my business separate from his social life. He'd never even visited my office. In his social circles, I was just Mark's wife, who has some kind of business downtown. He'd never even posted photos of us together on his carefully curated social media. As I closed my laptop and watched the sunrise paint our bedroom wall, I felt something I hadn't felt since discovering the affair: power. The scales were about to balance. It wasn't a triumphant kind of power, not the kind that fuels revenge fantasies or makes you feel invincible. It was quieter than that. Heavier. A knowing power. The kind you earn not by attacking, but by enduring. I had spent nights staring at ceilings, feeling discarded. And now I was creating the first shift in a game they didn't even know they were playing. "What are you doing up so early?" Mark mumbled from his side of the bed. I turned to him with the sweetest smile I could muster. "Just making sure everything's in place for what comes next." The interview process moved quickly. I made sure to stay in the background, having my HR director conduct the initial screenings. Jessica's application arrived within days of the job posting, her cover letter practically vibrating with enthusiasm. Her qualifications were actually quite good. Mark may be trash, but he apparently had decent taste in professional women. I reviewed her application materials personally, searching for hints that she might recognize my name or make the connection. Nothing. Mark had done too good a job of minimizing me in his life. In her mind, I was probably just a vague concept, the inconvenient wife who would eventually be discarded. That thought sat with me longer than I expected. Not because she saw me as an obstacle, but because he had made sure she never saw me at all. I wasn't even a threat worth acknowledging. I was background noise in a story where he cast himself as the noble victim and her as the heroine. The first time I saw her in person was during the final interview I arranged to observe through the one-way glass of our conference room while my executive team conducted the formal questioning. My heart hammered so loudly I was certain everyone could hear it. She was beautiful, of course. Younger than me, with that confident energy of someone who hasn't yet faced real disappointment. Dark hair cut in an expensive bob. Designer clothes that suggested she spent beyond her means. As she answered questions articulately about marketing strategies and campaign metrics, I searched her face for signs of deceit or manipulation. Instead, I saw something unexpected: genuine intelligence and ambition. And maybe, just beneath the polish, a flicker of someone who still believed in the idea of being chosen. Someone who hadn't yet learned that the men who claim to rescue you are often the ones who ruin you slowly. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "She's exactly what we need for the Whitman account," my VP of operations said afterward. "When can she start?" "Make the offer." "Today," I replied. "I want her on board by next week." The day Jessica accepted our offer, Mark came home with flowers. A random Tuesday. No special occasion. My stomach clenched. "What's this for?" I asked, taking the bouquet with a performance of wifely appreciation. "Can't a man just appreciate his wife?" He kissed my cheek, his hand lingering at my waist. I wondered if he'd touched Jessica the same way earlier that day. Later, I checked his phone. While he showered, a text to Jessica: "Can't meet this weekend. Family obligation I can't get out of. We'll make it up to you next week." The family obligation was his cousin's wedding, an event he'd tried to get out of until I insisted we attend together. Now he was using me as his excuse while simultaneously buying me guilt flowers. I gave the flowers to our housekeeper. The next morning, Jessica's first day at the company, was a master class in self-control. I stayed in my office until midday, reviewing reports and preparing myself. The act of seeing her in the flesh, of placing a face to the woman who had been inserted into the most intimate spaces of my life, required a level of restraint that felt almost physical. It wasn't fear I wrestled with. It was the pull of impulse. The impulse to expose everything, to confront her, to demand a reckoning. But I knew better. Reckonings lose power when they're rushed. Then I casually strolled into the orientation lunch, extending my hand to each new hire. "Welcome to Lynn & Co. I'm Rachel Lynn, founder and CEO." When I reached Jessica, our eyes met, and I searched for any flicker of recognition. There was none, just professional enthusiasm and perhaps a touch of intimidation at meeting the boss. "Jessica Monroe, Senior Marketing Strategist," she replied, her handshake firm. I'm so excited to be here. We have high expectations for you, I said, holding her gaze just a beat too long. I'll be monitoring your work closely. Over the next few weeks, I kept Jessica busy with high-profile projects that required regular interaction with me. I assigned her to lead our biggest client presentation, ensuring she'd need to work late nights at the office. Each time she apologetically mentioned needing to cancel personal plans, I graciously told her that dedication was what set our company apart. I wondered if Mark was growing frustrated with her sudden unavailability. I also made sure to mention my husband occasionally in her presence, never by name, just casual references. My husband and I attended that restaurant opening last month, or my husband's company uses that same vendor. The whole time, I was watching her check her phone when she thought no one was looking. Watching her expression fall slightly when she had to cancel another evening plan. Watching her try to maintain professional composure while her personal life was being systematically disrupted. During this period, Mark's behavior shifted too. More late nights at the office, more irritability at home, more transparent lies about his whereabouts. I played my part perfectly. The oblivious, work-obsessed wife who never questioned his absences because she was too preoccupied with her own career. The breaking point came during month 2. I'd assigned Jessica to a client in Seattle, a 3-day trip that, coincidentally, overlapped with Mark's supposed sales conference in the same city. I knew from my continued surveillance that they had planned to meet there. Their first opportunity for a rendezvous in weeks. I also knew that Mark had been complaining about me constantly in his texts to her. She's completely cold these days. All she cares about is that damn company. I'm starting to think about how to end things with minimal financial damage. The night before Jessica was scheduled to leave for Seattle, I called her into my office. I need to make a change to tomorrow's plans, I said calmly. Of course, she replied, poised and professional as always. What do you need? I've decided to attend the Seattle meeting myself. You'll stay here and handle the Miller presentation instead. I watched the careful control in her expression, the slight widening of her eyes, the quick calculation happening behind them. But I've prepared everything for Seattle, she said carefully. The Miller presentation would require significant. I have complete confidence in your ability to adapt, I interrupted smoothly. That's why we hired you, Jessica. Flexibility is essential in our industry. The flash of frustration in her eyes was quickly masked. Of course, I understand. As she left my office, I saw her pull out her phone, presumably to text Mark about the change in plans. I wondered what excuse he would come up with to cancel his own trip now that his rendezvous was ruined. The answer came that evening when he announced over dinner, "Bad news, honey, the Seattle conference got rescheduled. I don't have to go after all." I took a sip of wine and nodded sympathetically. What a shame. I know how much you were looking forward to it. Looking forward to a business conference? He laughed nervously. Well, I said, you seem particularly excited about this trip. His eyes darted away from mine, just eager to close the Henderson account. Funny coincidence, I said lightly. I'm actually heading to Seattle myself tomorrow, taking over a client meeting for one of my new marketing strategists. The fork paused halfway to his mouth. You are. I nodded. Last-minute change of plans. Business is unpredictable. That night, I monitored his texts from the bathroom. Can't believe the timing. R is going to Seattle now, have to cancel completely. This is getting complicated. Her response, this is the 3rd time you've canceled, starting to feel like I'm not a priority. I smiled at my reflection in the mirror. There it was, the first real sign that their illusion was beginning to fracture. All the curated affection, all the whispered promises, they were starting to lose shape under pressure. And not because I intervened loudly, but because I'd introduced just enough instability for them to unravel themselves. That smile in the mirror wasn't one of triumph. It was quieter, colder, the someone who had waited long enough for clarity. The cracks were starting to show. I had given everything to this marriage, and they had treated me like nothing. Now, it was time for the next phase of my plan. People underestimate quiet women. They mistake our silence for weakness, our patience for passivity, our planning for procrastination. That's their first mistake. Their second mistake is assuming we don't notice everything. I'd been noticing things about Mark for 15 years. I knew his tells, his patterns, the slight shift in his voice when he was lying. I knew his passwords because he used the same ones for everything. His mother's maiden name plus our anniversary date. Such irony, using our wedding date to hide his infidelity. But more importantly, I'd been noticing things about Jessica. During her 2 months at my company, she was talented, driven, slightly insecure beneath her polished exterior, desperate for validation, romantic to a fault, and something deeper, something she tried to hide, and ached to be seen fully, not just adored in secrecy. I recognized it because I had once lived in that same space, and I knew, inevitably, it would collide with the truth she wasn't ready to confront, which would become her breaking point. After the Seattle incident, I shifted strategy. Instead of separating them, I began creating opportunities for Jessica to see the real Mark. Not the charming, attentive lover who made her feel special, but the manipulative, self-serving man I had come to know. First, I promoted her to lead our new division, focusing on financial services. Conveniently, the same industry where Mark worked as regional sales director. This meant she would now interact with his colleagues, his clients, his professional world. This is a substantial vote of confidence, I told her during the promotion meeting. You'll be representing us with some of the most significant players in the financial sector. Her face lit up with genuine pride. Thank you for believing in me. I won't let you down. I know you won't, I replied. In fact, I'd like you to join me for dinner next week with some industry contacts. It's important they meet the new face of our financial services division. What I didn't tell her was that these industry contacts included several of Mark's colleagues, men who knew he was married but had covered for his indiscretions for years. Men who would recognize Jessica immediately. The dinner was scheduled at Mallory's, the most exclusive restaurant in the city. As we waited for our guests, I engaged Jessica in casual conversation, building rapport. I'd been careful over the past weeks to position myself as a mentor figure, sharing professional advice, taking interest in her ideas, creating a relationship built on respect and trust. May I ask you something personal? I said after our second glass of wine. She looked surprised but nodded. Of course. Are you seeing someone? I only ask because I've noticed you sometimes seem distracted, like you're managing something complicated in your personal life. Her cheeks flushed slightly. Is it that obvious? I smiled sympathetically. Only to someone who's been there. She hesitated, then spoke in a lowered voice. It's complicated. He's not exactly available. Ah, I nodded knowingly. Married? Her eyes widened in alarm. Don't worry, I reassured her. I'm not judging. Life is rarely black and white. Relief washed over her face. He's unhappy in his marriage, has been for years. His wife is completely absorbed in her career, barely notices him anymore. She paused. Sorry, that must sound terrible coming from a career woman to her boss who's… No offense taken, I interrupted smoothly. Every relationship is different. Though I found that men often have convenient narratives about their wives when they're pursuing someone else. Before she could respond, our dinner guests arrived. 3 senior executives from competing financial firms, all of whom worked closely with Mark. I watched their faces as they approached our table and recognized Jessica. The awkward glances between them, the too hearty greetings, the careful avoidance of certain topics. Throughout dinner, I strategically steered conversation toward office politics, corporate events, spouses, and families. I mentioned my husband several times, but never by name, noting how the men shifted uncomfortably each time. Jessica, perceptive as she was, clearly sensed something off about their reactions but couldn't place it. As the evening concluded, one of the men, Thomas, Mark's direct supervisor, pulled me aside. Rachel, I have to ask, does Mark know you've hired his… He trailed off, clearly uncomfortable. I fixed him with a steady gaze. His what, Thomas? He swallowed hard. Nothing. Never mind. No, please, I pressed. Finish your thought. It's not my business, he backpedaled. You're right. I agreed coolly. It's not. On the ride back to the office where Jessica had left her car, she was unusually quiet. Everything okay? I asked. Those men, she started hesitantly. They seem to know me, but I've never met them before. I kept my eyes on the road. Financial services is a small world. Perhaps they've seen you at industry events. Maybe, she said, unconvinced. The seeds of doubt were planted, but I needed more. The next phase involved Mark's company holiday party, an event I typically attended as the supportive wife, making bland conversation with people who barely remembered me from year to year. "I'd like you to attend the Kessler Financial Holiday Gala as our representative," I told Jessica the following week. "They're considering us for their marketing overhaul, and this would be good relationship building." "Kessler Financial?" she repeated, her voice slightly higher than normal. "Yes. Is there a problem?" "No," she said quickly. "No problem at all." I knew she was panicking inside. Kessler was Mark's company. She would be attending his holiday party, the same party where I would be present as his wife. It was a collision course, and she knew it. What she didn't know was that I had been methodically documenting everything for months. Every text between them, captured through the spyware my PI had installed. Financial records showing gifts Mark had purchased for her, using our joint credit card. Hotel receipts. Photos of them together entering and exiting restaurants, hotels, his company parking garage. I had also been quietly meeting with divorce attorneys, securing my company assets and preparing financially for what would come next. I'd moved significant portions of our joint savings into my protected business accounts, all perfectly legal given that they were legitimate business investments, but effectively placing them beyond Mark's reach in a divorce. The night before the holiday party, Mark was unusually attentive. He helped me choose my dress, a striking red gown that he said would turn heads. He suggested I wear my hair up, exposing my neck in the way he'd always found attractive. He was nervous, I realized. Nervous about tomorrow night, and trying to ensure I looked my best when I inevitably came face to face with his mistress. What tragic irony. He was preparing his wife to meet his lover, while I was preparing his lover to discover she was not the only one being deceived. As I laid out my jewelry for the next evening, Mark received a text. I watched his face as he read it, saw the micro-expression of panic before he composed himself. "Everything okay?" I asked innocently. "Fine," he said too quickly, "just work stuff, always something." Later, while he showered, I checked his phone. The message was from Jessica. "I have to attend your company party tomorrow night for work. What are we going to do?" His response, "Don't worry, my wife will be in a different part of the room. We'll barely interact. Just act professional. If we happen to meet, she won't suspect anything." I placed his phone back exactly where it had been and returned to selecting my earrings for tomorrow night's performance. The stage was set. All the players were in position. Tomorrow would change everything, but not in the way either of them expected. I went to bed that night feeling strangely calm. For months, I'd channeled my pain into planning rather than confrontation, my rage into strategy rather than scenes. It was no longer about catching them. It was about control. I had found a way to rise above the chaos they created, without lowering myself into it. I had stopped bleeding and started calculating, and now they were walking right into the story I had written for them. While they thought I was oblivious, I'd been orchestrating their undoing with the same methodical precision I'd used to build my business. They thought I gave everything to my career and nothing to my marriage. They were about to learn how thoroughly they had underestimated me. The Kessler Financial Holiday Gala was held at the Grand Hamilton downtown, a glittering affair of champagne towers and ice sculptures meant to distract from the company's mediocre performance that year. I arrived on Mark's arm, the picture of wifely support in my red dress and upswept hair. He was unusually nervous, his palms sweaty against mine. "You look stunning tonight," he said for the third time since we'd left home. "Everyone's going to be jealous that you're with me." I smiled, touching his cheek gently. "That's sweet, but we both know I'm the lucky one." His expression flickered with discomfort. Perhaps guilt, perhaps fear, perhaps both. "Let's get a drink," he suggested, already pulling away toward the bar. I scanned the room methodically, spotting Jessica almost immediately. She stood near the entrance in a navy blue dress, clutching her purse with white knuckles, her eyes darting nervously around the room. When she spotted Mark at the bar, her posture changed subtly. A straightening of her spine, a slight lift of her chin, the body language of a woman seeing her lover. Then her gaze shifted and landed on me beside him. I saw the exact moment recognition dawned, her eyes widening, her lips parting slightly in shock. She had seen my photo before, of course, perhaps social media glimpses or company materials, but seeing me in person on Mark's arm was evidently jarring. I pretended not to notice her, accepting my champagne from Mark with a warm smile that made him relax slightly. Poor Mark, thinking. The worst was avoided because we hadn't been formally introduced yet. I should circulate, I told him. Introduce myself to some of the new executives. Of course, he agreed quickly, clearly relieved. I need to check in with Thomas about the Henderson account. Anyway, we separated, and I watched him immediately text something on his phone. Across the room, Jessica checked her device, then slipped out to the terrace. Classic. Instead of following them or creating a scene, I approached Thomas and his wife, engaging them in conversation about their recent vacation to Bali. All the while, I monitored Mark's movements in my peripheral vision, as he briefly joined Jessica on the terrace before returning inside. Careful to maintain separation, their little ballet of discretion continued for an hour. Her networking with Kessler executives, as my company representative, him playing the beautiful employee, while they exchanged meaningful glances across the room. It would have been almost impressive, if it weren't so pathetic. At precisely 9:30 p.m., I excused myself from a conversation and approached the stage, where the company CEO was preparing to give his annual address. I'd arranged this moment weeks ago, calling in a favor from the CEO's wife, a former client who adored me. Before we begin the formal remarks, the CEO announced, "I'd like to invite Rachel Lynn to say a few words. As many of you know, her consulting firm has been instrumental in several of our subsidiary companies' success this year." Surprised murmurs rippled through the crowd. This wasn't on the program. Mark looked stricken as I gracefully ascended the steps to the podium, my red dress catching the light dramatically. "Thank you for that kind introduction," I began, my voice steady and clear. "Kessler Financial has been a valued associate of Lynn & Co. for many years, and I'm looking forward to expanding that relationship in the coming year." I paused, scanning the crowd until I found both Mark and Jessica in my sightline. In fact, I've recently brought on a brilliant new marketing strategist who I believe will revolutionize how financial services companies like Kessler connect with their clients. "Jessica Monroe, would you please join me on stage?" The room went silent. Jessica stood frozen, her champagne glass nearly slipping from her fingers. Mark had gone pale, his eyes darting between us in undisguised panic. Slowly, Jessica made her way to the stage, her professional training apparently overriding her personal terror. As she climbed the steps, I extended my hand to her with a warm smile. "Jessica has been an extraordinary addition to our team," I continued smoothly. "Her creativity and dedication have impressed everyone, including me, her direct supervisor." I turned to her, maintaining my pleasant expression. "Jessica, would you like to say a few words about the marketing innovations you envision for companies like Kessler?" Trapped, she had no choice but to take the microphone. To her credit, she managed to deliver a brief, coherent statement about digital marketing strategies, despite the visible tremor in her hands. Her voice quivered slightly, but she held steady, clinging to professionalism as a shield. I watched her carefully, not with malice, but with calculated detachment. She was no longer just the woman my husband had chosen. She was the woman now caught between the truth and its consequences. When she finished, I reclaimed the microphone. "Thank you, Jessica. I consider myself fortunate to work with such talented people." I paused meaningfully. Loyalty and honesty are values I prize above all others, both in business and in personal relationships. My eyes found Mark in the crowd. He was sweating, visibly now. "Speaking of personal relationships, I'd like to take this moment to acknowledge my husband, Mark Lynn." "Mark, where are you, darling?" "Don't be shy." Reluctantly, he raised his hand. All eyes turned to him. "After 15 years of marriage," I continued, "I've learned that transparency is essential for success." "Don't you agree, Mark?" He nodded mechanically, clearly trying to determine how much I knew and what I planned to do with that knowledge. It was almost poetic, really, how easily the tables had turned. The man who had once kept secrets with such ease now stood trembling under the weight of unspoken truths. Wonderful. In that spirit of transparency, I have an announcement to make. The room went completely silent. Mark looked like he might pass out. Jessica had gone rigid beside me. Lynn & Co. will be opening a new office in London next month, and I've chosen Jessica to head up that division, effective immediately. Confused applause scattered through the audience. This wasn't the public humiliation everyone was suddenly expecting. Jessica stared at me in shock. It's a tremendous opportunity, I continued. 3 years minimum commitment, substantial salary increase, full relocation package. The paperwork is already prepared. We can sign tonight if you're ready, Jessica. I turned to her with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Unless, of course, there's something keeping you here. Our eyes locked, and in that moment, perfect understanding passed between us. She knew that I knew everything, and she realized I was offering her an escape route, a clean break, a fresh start, thousands of miles away from the mess she'd unwittingly stepped into. I'm honored. She stammered. Yes, I accept. More applause, louder this time. I shook her hand firmly for the benefit of cameras. Perfect. And one more announcement, I added, turning back to the crowd. After considerable thought, I've decided to dissolve my personal partnership while strengthening my professional ones. Mark's face crumpled as my meaning became clear. The papers were delivered to our home this afternoon, I continued calmly. I'm sure we can handle this transition as maturely as possible. Now, please enjoy the rest of your evening. I descended the steps to thunderous, awkward applause, mixed with shocked whispers. Thomas immediately approached me, his expression a mixture of admiration and discomfort. That was quite a statement. Rachel, was it? I replied innocently. I believe in addressing business and personal changes efficiently. Across the room, Mark was making his way toward the exit, his phone pressed to his ear, likely calling his attorney. Several of his colleagues stepped back as he passed, already distancing themselves from the fallout. Meanwhile, Jessica remained on stage, still processing what had happened. Her posture stiff, her eyes unfocused, as if her brain was still catching up to the reality she now stood in. The applause had faded, but the echo of what she'd just witnessed lingered in the air like smoke after a fire. She had entered the evening as someone's secret. Now she stood exposed beneath a spotlight she had never imagined. When our eyes met again, I gave her a small nod, not forgiveness, I wasn't there yet, but acknowledgement of our shared manipulation by the same man. As I prepared to leave, she approached me cautiously. I didn't know, she said quietly, about you, about who you really were. He told me his wife was cold, distant, career-obsessed, emotionally unavailable. I finished for her. Yes. I've read the texts, her face flushed with shame. The London position is real, I continued matter-of-factly. The choice is yours, but I suggest you think carefully about a man who lies so effortlessly to both his wife and his mistress. I never wanted to hurt anyone, she whispered. There was a tremble in her voice. Not just guilt, but a deeper recognition that she had been both a participant and a pawn. And yet, I replied simply. As I turned to leave, she called after me. Why didn't you just fire me when you found out? I paused, considering the question. Because that would have been reactive, not strategic. And because sometimes the most effective consequences aren't the most obvious ones. I left her standing there, walked through the whispers and stares of Mark's colleagues, and stepped into the cool night air. Alone. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened. Not just Mark's betrayal, but my own transformation through it. I had given everything to our marriage, and they had treated it like nothing. But in responding the way I did, calculated, strategic, controlled, I had reclaimed my power, my dignity, and my future on my own terms. My phone buzzed with a text from Mark. How long have you known? I didn't respond. Some questions don't deserve answers. 6 months later, I sat in my London office overlooking the Thames, reviewing quarterly projections with my UK team. Jessica had ultimately accepted the position, a decision that surprised me at first, but eventually made sense. She was escaping her mistakes, proving herself professionally, and putting an ocean between her and Mark. I respected the choice, if not the person who made it. Our working relationship remained strictly professional. I never mentioned Mark, and she never again attempted to apologize or explain. The unspoken agreement between us created a strange but effective dynamic, 2 women moving forward, separately, from the man who had deceived them both. The divorce had been finalized with unexpected efficiency. Mark, desperate to avoid further public embarrassment, accepted my terms without much resistance. His career at Kessler had suffered irreparable damage, not because of the affair itself, but because of how thoroughly he'd been outmaneuvered by his wife. Men in finance can forgive many sins, but appearing weak isn't one of them. I received occasional updates about him through mutual acquaintances. He'd moved to a smaller company, sold our house at a loss, and was dating someone new, a younger woman from his gym. Some patterns never change. As for me, I expanded Linen Co. to 3 new international locations, doubled our client roster, and purchased a sleek apartment overlooking Central Park for when I visited our New York office. My life had been reconstructed entirely on my terms. The pain hadn't disappeared completely. Betrayal leaves scars that time can fade but never erase. Sometimes I still woke in the night, replaying moments from my marriage, searching for signs I should have seen earlier. The difference was that these moments no longer defined me. They were simply part of a story that had shaped but not broken me. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, I received an unexpected email from Jessica. The London office was thriving under her leadership, exceeding projections for the 3rd consecutive quarter. At the bottom of her detailed report, she'd added a personal note. "I know we'll never discuss what happened, but I want you to know I've learned from it, not just professionally, but personally. You could have destroyed me, but you chose a different path. I won't forget that lesson." I closed the email without responding. Some acknowledgments don't require reply. That evening, I attended a finance industry dinner alone. As I circulated through the crowd of London's business elite, a distinguished man with silver temples approached me. "Rachel Lynn?" he inquired with a British accent. "Your reputation precedes you. I'm Alexander Harrington, Blackwell Partners." "Nice to meet you," I replied, accepting his handshake. "I've heard quite the story about how you handle complicated situations," he said with a knowing smile. I met his gaze steadily. "I believe in turning challenges into opportunities, Mr. Harrington. It's simply good business. And apparently effective in personal matters as well," he observed. "The principles are the same," I replied. "Assess the situation honestly. Develop a strategic response rather than an emotional one, and always play the long game." He laughed appreciatively. "I'd love to hear more about your philosophy, perhaps over dinner sometime." 6 months ago, I would have declined automatically, still too raw from betrayal to consider moving forward. But standing there, I realized something important. I had crossed a threshold. My strength was no longer defined by the armor I wore, but by the decisions I made moving forward. I had built something out of ruin, not as a monument to pain, but as a testament to clarity, patience, and intention. I wasn't the same woman who had discovered those credit card charges and text messages. That woman had been blindsided by betrayal. This woman, the one I had become, had faced that betrayal and emerged stronger, wiser, and more firmly in command of her own life. "I'd like that," I said simply. Later that night, as rain pattered against my windows, I thought about the strange path that had led me here. I had hired my husband's mistress without her knowing who I was. A decision born of pain and rage, but executed with calculation and restraint. It hadn't been about revenge. Not really. It had been about reclaiming control of a narrative that had been stolen from me. Some might call it vindictive. I called it necessary reconstruction. I didn't regret any of it. Not the months of silent planning. Not the calculated confrontation. Not even the pain that had initiated it all. Because without that catalyst, I might have continued indefinitely in a marriage built on lies and false security. Instead, I found something more valuable than revenge. I found myself. As I accepted Alexander's dinner invitation, I knew this was just the beginning of my new chapter. Mark and Jessica had given me an unexpected gift, the freedom to rebuild my life entirely on my terms. The perfect revenge wasn't destroying them, it was thriving without them. So the story is over, my wonderful friends, and you're still here, reading, listening, watching, at this hour? That tells me something. That tells me this story didn't just entertain you, it touched you. Maybe it stirred something inside, a memory, a wound, or a quiet strength you've almost forgotten you had. You see, this wasn't just a story about betrayal or revenge. It was about reclamation, about a woman who was shattered and chose not to break, but to rebuild. Her marriage was a lie, but instead of becoming bitter or lost, she became strategic. She transformed her pain into power. And isn't that something we all wish we could do? Too often we're taught to react immediately, to explode when wronged. But Rachel reminded us that sometimes the most profound healing is quiet, and the most impactful revenge is success. As Viktor Frankl once said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. And isn't that what she chose? Growth, freedom, dignity. Not to destroy others, but to thrive without them. To those of you holding on to betrayal, heartbreak, or even self-doubt, remember this: you are not what happened to you. You are what you choose to become after it. So if this story spoke to you, even just a little, if you found yourself nodding, feeling seen, or quietly cheering, then please like this video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe for more stories that understand you the way this one did. We'll keep telling the truths no one talks about. And you just keep showing up. Because that, my dear friend, is how we all begin again.